Oh, you know what? I think we have to hold it like here to not make too much noise. Otherwise. Oh, we're live now? Okay. Should I start? Well, we have 2 minutes left, but we can start wherever. Okay. We'll just start talking, maybe not officially, but. Hi, everybody. We want to make this interactive. So I'm going to ask questions to Reverend Tafel and Venerable, but is it still too cold?
No, it's just the wind, you know. Mm-hmm. We just turn off the fan, maybe.
Oh, okay. We're working on the AC. But if you could come up with questions, any questions that you have, really, because it's a very broad framework. Because really, I'm going to ask them how we should live our lives. So it's very broad. So feel free to come up with whatever questions you have to two people who have thought a lot about how to live a meaningful life. So, and also if there's very specific things you want them to clarify or elaborate on. So there'll be lots of time for questions from the audience and also from online. So, is it better now?
질문하는 마이크, 저 사람들 질문할 때 마이크 있나? 이걸 가져가야 돼.
So he has to. So if anybody in the audience needs to ask a question, you
Yes.
got to use your mic.
Yes, I'm going to share my
You're
mic.
going to say.
Yeah.
And Sani will help the microphone to deliver to the question.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. We have a system now. Well, is it not loud enough? Okay. Hang on one second. We're going to make this a little bit louder. Can you guys all hear? Okay. 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 Well, I want to thank everyone for coming today. This is really exciting for me because these are two people I really admire and who have helped me personally to find some inner peace. I'm not there completely, but they've been very helpful. And I'm hoping that today we can have a discussion in person and also online. And most of the people online are probably from Korea. That's my guess, because Sunim has quite a following in Korea, especially among young people. So it could be interesting to hear what kind of questions are asked from participants in Korea. But this is our chance for all of us to walk out of here feeling like we know how to live now, okay? So I'm going to start by introducing our two wonderful speakers here. I think of them as teachers. VenerablePomnyun Sunim is the founder of Jongcho Society, a Buddhist practice community modeled after the Buddhist traditional Sangha. He's also the chair of Join Together Society, an international relief organization recognized by the United Nations, and Eco-Buddha, an environmental conservation organization. He advocates for peace with North Korea and has engaged in humanitarian work on North Korean matters since the late 1990s. He's regarded as an expert on the subject of North Korea. He received what is known as the Nobel Peace Prize of Asia, the Ramon Magsaysay Award for Peace and International Understanding in 2002, and the Niwano Peace Prize in 2020. VenerablePomnyun Sunim is well known for his Q&A Dharma talks in Korea. And he's very popular there, even among the youth, because he's very candid, he's very compassionate, and has a sense of humor while he does these Dharma talks, where people ask these questions very directly about how to live. And Reverend Tafel here is the pastor of the Church of the Holy City, where we are sitting right now. He's a serial entrepreneur and social innovator and has launched a number of nonprofits and for-profit companies and has advised over 100 social entrepreneurs around the world. He's a published author who is currently working on his second book. This one is about conflict resolution and a technique that he's developed called cultural translation. Recently, he conducted a culture translation training at the White House, and he's going to be doing more there. And it sounds like a good idea to do something like that in the White House. He's a man of many accomplishments and experiences, and the list is quite long, so I'm not going to go through the whole list. But he's done a number of things that involves social impact, as well as something he's developed at the Church of the Holy City called the Spiritual Entrepreneur Incubator. And all together with many of the people in the room, we're going to be spending a lot of time developing that into something that has great impact in Washington. The thing that I find interesting is that Venerable and Reverend Tafel come from very different cultures and religious traditions, and of course speak different languages. But I admire them for the same reason, because they try to counsel people to ease their suffering and to live a happier, freer life. And they feel a real responsibility to be public servants as well and really engage in the public sphere. And they're strong believers in democracy and human rights. And so I've benefited so much from knowing them over many years now. So, yeah. So I'm going to start with questions, but feel free to ask each other questions as well. Yeah. And I would start up by asking you, just to get this out of the way, because I think some of the people here are probably interested in learning about what Buddhism is really about and what Swedenborgianism is about. So maybe if you could just very briefly describe your religious philosophy. Yeah.
불교라고 하지만은 불교의 종류가 하도 많기 때문에 불교 안에서의 서로 다른 섹터가 모든 종교의 섹터만큼 그렇게 많이 벌어져 있기 때문에 불교가 뭐다고 이렇게 말하기는 어렵습니다.
It's very difficult to say what Buddhism is, since Buddhism. There's so many different sects within this thing construct called Buddhism. There are more sects within Buddhism than there are probably sects of all the other religions combined. So, very difficult to say in one sentence what Buddhism is.
그래서 제가 생각하는 불교 이렇게 여러분께 말씀드리겠습니다.
So, but I do want to share, the Buddhism that I think what Buddhism is.
불교는 죽어서 어디 간다든지 존이란 복 받는다든지 이런 어떤 내생이나 복을 받는 그런 가르침은 아닙니다.
So Buddhism is it's not about teaching about the health and wealth gospel, kind of teaching people they can go to a good place after they die, or they get to a good place if they do a lot of good deeds. That's not what Buddhism is.
지금 내가 어떻게 하면 괴로움 없이 살 수 있느냐 하는 그런 문제를 던집니다.
So the core question about Buddhism is how can I live happily without suffering here and now?
우리의 괴로움이라는 것이 누가 나를 괴롭히는 것이 아니라 나의 어리석음, 나의 무지가 괴로움의 원인이라고 말합니다.
And he teaches that the source of our suffering is not from anybody else, from the external, but it comes from our own ignorance.
자신의 어리석음을 깨우치면 그 괴로움에서 벗어날 수 있습니다.
And if you can enlighten that ignorance, then you can escape your suffering.
스스로 자신의 어리석음을 깨우치는 것을 깨달음이라고 말하고 깨달음을 통해서 모든 괴로움에서 벗어난다라고 가르칩니다.
So the process of awakening your own ignorance is enlightenment. And enlightenment is the state of being free from your suffering.
그러니까 어떤 이론이나 지식이 아니고 그리고 어떤 믿음도 아니고 지금 여기 자신에게 끼어있는 그런 수행이라는 것을 말하고 있습니다.
So it's not a theory, it's not a philosophy, it's not a belief system. It's actually a practice by which you practice to be awake to yourself in the here and now.
그렇기 때문에 그가 무슨 종교를 믿든 그가 어떤 사상을 갖고 있든 관계없이 누구나 다 깨달음을 통해서 괴로움 없는 삶을 살 수가 있다는 겁니다.
So regardless of what beliefs you have, what faith you hold, anybody can actually, live a life free from suffering through enlightenment.
네, 그래서 저는 사람들이 어떤 스트레스나 괴로움이 있다면 그 괴로움에서 벗어나는 길을 향해서 대화를 나눕니다.
So when I have conversation or dialogues with people, it's all about, if people have certain amount of specific suffering or pain, how do we help them escape that?
그런 대화의 과정에서 본인이 스스로 자각을 하면 자기의 문제에서 벗어날 수 있고요. 그 대화를 통해서도 자각이 일어나지 않으면 괴로움에서 벗어날 수가 없습니다.
And in the course of that dialogue, some people actually kind of realize for themselves there is no cause for that suffering they've been actually having, and those people are able to escape their suffering. But others, are not able to get to that state of realization, and they continue to suffer.
이러한 대화는 스스로 자신의 모순, 자기의 무지를 자각하도록 도와주는 그런 대화라고 할 수 있습니다.
So the dialogues of Dharma talks that I hold is all about helping the questioners go through his or her own story and realize the contradiction within that story.
저는 이 불교를 통해서 제가 좀 더 행복하고 자유로워졌기 때문에 다른 사람도 그랬으면 좋겠다. 이렇게 해서 이렇게 대화를 하고 있습니다.
Because I have become freer and happier through Buddhism, I was wishing that same kind of experience to everybody else. That's why I started this dialogue.
Thank you, and let me just first say what an honor it is to have you at Church of the Holy City. For your second visit, you bring such amazing spiritual energy into this space. We are very grateful to have you here. Not only have I had a chance to watch him in person here once before, but I've attended one of his Dharma talks during the pandemic on Zoom. And he is just the most amazing teacher. And you really have to see it to believe it. It's really amazing work. So very practical. And just particularly for people who have no idea, young people will line up at events and ask personal questions about their life, and he just answers, boom, and boom, just the next person. Really a cool thing. So I hope you get a chance to watch, and I know there are recordings on Zoom. So with what do we believe? So we are a Christian faith. We are more on the mystical edge of Christianity, so it's a little different than a lot of traditional Christianity. What makes it different is that we believe all faith paths are good, so it would make sense that we'd be hosting interfaith discussions, and that we do believe in an afterlife, but we believe it's the sum of whatever you love the most in your life. You spend eternity with those who you're most like in your heart. And so that's what heaven really is. It's really living a life of love on earth. It's the only way you can love God. And then when you transition out of this physical sphere, you would be with a community of people who share your greatest love. So and some people can choose to be unspiritually evolved, and they would be with that community. So that's some of the differences in Christianity. It has a lot of similarities with Buddhism. D.T. Suzuki wrote a book called Buddha of the North, Emanuel Swedenborg, because he found in those teachings similarities with Buddhism, in particular the engagement in the world. We believe you have to be engaged in the world, which is probably why both of us are very engaged in politics and business and change and so forth. The spiritual life is not divorced from engagement. The spiritual life means you're engaged to make the world a better place. And we each have a purpose, and we're asked to live that out. So that would be, in a nutshell, our teachings.
So the question that I'm dying to ask is, and I admit I'm consumed by this question, so many people feel stressed right now because the world seems very divided. People often feel alone in the world, and the future just seems uncertain. And it's really hard to get your bearing and figure out, like, how to create a path, like how to survive this. So I was hoping you would have some advice for us.
좋은 질문이고 또 어려운 질문이기도 합니다.
It's a good question and a difficult one.
그러나 저는 좀 쉽게 얘기하려고 합니다.
But I want to give you an easy answer.
이 세상은 아무 문제가 없다.
There's nothing wrong with this world.
내가 알고 있던 과거와 달라졌기 때문에 혼란을 느낍니다.
The confusion comes in the fact that this world may be different from the world you used to know.
옛날보다 좋아졌다면, 본인이 좋아졌다고 느낀다면 혼란이 없습니다.
As if you think this world is actually better than the world you used to know, then there is no confusion.
옛날보다 뭔가 못해졌다면 혼란을 느낍니다.
But you feel that confusion and chaos because you think this world is not as good as the world that you used to live in.
또 옛날에는 세상의 움직임을 저희가 파악할 수 있었는데 지금은 세상의 움직임을 잘 파악할 수 없다면 혼란을 느낍니다.
You also feel confused because in the previous world that you lived in, perhaps you were able to tell the different dynamics and trends. You were able to understand the goings on that world. And if you can't tell the goings on this world, then you feel more confused and chaotic.
세상이 혼란스러운 게 아니라 그것을 인식하는 내 머리가 인식이 잘 안 되니까 혼란스럽습니다.
So it's not the world that's chaotic or divided or confused. It's the limitation of your cognitive bandwidth to actually understand the new world, the dynamics that's populating this new world.
그러니까 과거의 나의 어떤 세상을 바라보는 그 인식의 틀을 버리고 세상을 있는 그대로 바라본다 하면 혼란은 사라질 것입니다.
So if you're able to throw away the cognitive framework by which you used to understand the world and really look at this world from an open perspective, then that confusion will go away.
이런 변화가 일어나면 언제든지 그 변화를 통해서 좋아진 사람도 있고 나빠진 사람도 있습니다.
Because whenever a change happens, there are people who benefit from the change and there are those who don't benefit from that change.
그 나빠진 사람들을 어떻게 안정적으로 고통을 줄여줄 거냐 하는 것이 우리들의 과제입니다.
So our assignment is about how do we lessen the pain and suffering of those who actually lost out from that change.
그리고 변화를 통해서 이익을 얻은 사람들은 나누어 가져야 합니다.
And those people who actually benefited from the change needs to be able to share.
그런데 그것이 자기가 잘해서 얻은 것처럼 착각을 합니다.
But people make the mistake into thinking that it was all about them who actually, put them better. That it's not the change that actually put them in this position.
그것이 자기 것이 아닌 줄을 알아야 우리는 필요에 의해서 나눌 수가 있습니다.
So only when we know that what we have is not all about because due to me, can we share?
지금은 이 변화 가운데 가장 큰 우리들의 과제가 기후 변화입니다.
And then one of the biggest changes that's facing us is a climate change.
지금까지 우리는 많이 생산해서 많이 소비하는 것이 잘 사는 거다라고 이렇게 물질적인 생산으로 표현을 했습니다.
So we had until now we had a material definition of what a good life is, and good life was equated to producing more and consuming more.
이것은 지금 기후위기 시대에서는 굉장히 위험한 가치관입니다.
So this value system, this definition of a good life is very dangerous in today's age of climate change.
그래서 이 소비 수준을 낮춰야 합니다.
That's why we need to reduce our consumption.
그러면 적게 쓰고도 어떻게 행복해질 수 있느냐는 문제입니다.
Then the question becomes, how can we remain happy? Can we sustain our happiness while consuming less?
그래서 우리는 과거의 인류의 스승들에 대해서 살펴봐야 합니다.
And that harkens us back to all the sages and teachers of the past.
굉장히 검소하게 살아가면서도 행복한 사람들이 있었습니다.
There were people in the past who were very happy living very modestly.
그리고 또 남에게 도움을 줬습니다.
And they also helped others.
부다가 그랬고요.
Buddha did that.
프란체스코 성인 같은 분도 그랬고요.
Saint Francis did that.
지금 우리는 그런 분들의 삶에 대해서 다시 귀 기울여야 합니다.
So it behooves us to actually study their lives.
또 이런 그 유튜브의 이런 알고리즘 이런 걸로 인해서 자기 보고 싶은 것만 보기 때문에 듣고 싶은 것 듣기 때문에 사고가 자꾸 편중되어 가고 있습니다.
We also, find ourselves being a little, actually, living within our rabbit holes of perceptions and ideologies and beliefs because, the social media algorithm kind of shows us what we want to see.
자기만 옳고 상대는 그러다 하는 것이 더 강해지고 있습니다.
And the fact that the belief that I am right and you are wrong is stronger.
이것이 누가 옳고 그런 것이 아니라 서로 다름을 인정하는 게 필요합니다.
So it's important for us to recognize the differences, not right or wrong.
서로 다름을 인정하는 것이 존중입니다.
Because acknowledging each other's differences is respect.
믿음이 다르고 사상이 다르고 가치관이 다르다.
Although we have different beliefs and value systems,
이렇게 다름을 인정하는 즉 존중하는 자세가 필요합니다.
but acknowledging the differences is actually a position of respect.
이게 잘 안 되기 때문에 갈등이 심해지고 마지막에는 전쟁까지 일어나는 것입니다.
Because we're not so good at this, that leads to conflicts and ultimately, in some cases, war.
즉 상대에 대한 이해가 부족하다는 거죠.
So in short, in other words, we lack understanding of the other.
자기식으로 본다는 거죠.
Because we see the world from our perspective.
이런 것은 우리가 해결해야 될 극복의 과제입니다.
So these are the things that we need to resolve.
또 이 빈부격차가 너무 벌어지고 있고요.
There's a huge difference between the huge gap between the rich and poor.
이것을 조금 완화시켜야 합니다.
Try to mitigate that gap.
아니면 이 상대적 박탈감 때문에 밥을 먹고 이렇게 생활하는데 이상이 없지만은 빈부격차가 너무 크면 상대적 박탈감 때문에 행복도가 떨어집니다.
Because that's relative poverty or relative deprivation, reduces our sense of happiness and well-being.
이런 것을 완화시키는 이런 실천이 필요합니다.
And so we need some action that can mitigate these gaps.
어떤 말세라든지 어떤 징벌이 아니라 변화가 있었고 우리는 이 변화 속에서 나타나는 여러 가지 부정적인 문제를 어떻게 개선할 것인가에 집중해야 합니다.
So this is not about apocalypse or end of times or some kind of punishment. A change happened, and our homework is all about mitigating, the negative impacts of that change, the targeted population.
특히 정신적인 이런 맑은 정신을 가져서 이렇게 물질적이지 않은 행복을 느끼는 소위 영성을 좀 더 개발하는 이런 것이 더 필요하지 않나 생각합니다.
Especially, more capacity building, from a mental health perspective, so that, not consuming as much, yet maintaining a clear mind.
I'll go with that answer. I like that. Similarly, a lot of similarity. I would say, big picture, we're in a period of evolution in the world, and it's quite traumatic and dramatic. So it would be, as the monk had referred to, the change, dramatic change is taking place. And so it's very unnerving and confusing. And so I believe we're actually moving to a better world, believe it or not, but we're going to go through a tumultuous period. So I think that's kind of the period that we're in. The question about what can we do would be very similar to what you just heard. So this is the similarity in an interfaith dialogue, which is it's within us. So we tend to look at outside of ourselves for the answers, and we tend to create a villain, see ourselves as victims, and we see the problem as out there. And if they will change, everything would be fine. And everybody would be more like me. If everyone was more like me, we wouldn't have a problem. And the reality is, the problem is within us. We have to take 100% responsibility for the change in the world, and it starts with us. And it really means, we would say, a spiritual practice of moving from selfishness and self-service to one of love of others and learning to put others first. Annabel mentioned the training that I'm working on, and the training is very much what was just spoken, really we've got to develop, I would say, the spiritual skills to see the world through other people's eyes and understand they have different worldviews, but not wrong worldviews, and that anybody who we've taken disagreement now, particularly I know in our country right now, from I disagree with you to I hate you. And we now have a culture of contempt for others. This will not end well. This will end in violence if we continue. So we do need what I call revolution of the heart. We have to change within ourselves to develop the ability to see the world through other people's perspectives and understand that in our language, everybody is created in the image of God. Whoever you're looking at is created in the image of God, no matter how much you might not like them or you disagree with them. But you do have to, in our tradition, you do have to love them. We're asked to love our enemies. So that would, to me, would be the focus is taking 100% responsibility for yourself, getting out of yourself, getting out of the selfish mode. It's not all about you, and seeing what you can contribute. And I will just add that in the spiking of anxiety that's taking place in our culture in this country, the one group that is not spiking the same way are people who have a faith community. So I do believe a spiritual practice is a really helpful way to break out of that, what can be a nihilist culture.
I hope you guys have follow-up questions to all that. Thank you. I have another question. What would you say right now is your personal mission? Like you wake up in the morning thinking about this, you go to bed thinking about this. What is your mission right now?
첫째는 제 자신이 좀 더 평화롭게 생활하는 거라고 말할 수 있고요.
First and foremost, it's all about how can I live, a little more happier, freer.
세상에서 말하는 좋은 일이라도 지나치게 욕심을 내거나 집착을 하면 제 자신이 괴로워집니다.
Because even good deeds that people all agree that these are good deeds, but if I obsess too much over it, if I attach to myself to it too much, that it creates my own suffering.
지나치게 힘이 들거나 스트레스를 받으면 이 일은 오래 할 수가 없습니다.
And if I'm too stressed out or I'm too tired doing this work, that I can't sustain it.
그렇기 때문에 지속적으로 하려면 자신의 삶이 좀 더 가벼워야 합니다.
So in order for us to sustain anything, our lives have to get lighter.
두 번째는 다른 사람들도 좀 더 무거운 짐을 내려놓고 가볍고 행복하게 살았으면 좋겠다.
The second is I want others to also live their lives in a lighter fashion so that they can free themselves from their burden.
그렇게 될 수 있는 길, 저 같으면 부다의 가르침을 전한다든지 사람들과의 대화를 한다든지.
And the way that I help people do that, become lighter, is to convey the teachings of the Buddhas and engage in this type of dialogue.
그다음에 이 세상에는 기본적인 생존이 유지되지 않는 많은 사람들이 지구상에 있습니다.
And in this world, of course, there are a lot of people who actually do not have enough to survive.
제가 먹을 수 있으니까 배고픈 사람에게 도움을 줘야 한다고 생각하고요.
So I believe since I am able to eat, I think it behooves us to also help others who cannot eat.
제가 건강하니까 아픈 사람을 도와줘야 된다고 생각합니다.
Because I'm healthy, I think we owe it to ourselves and others to help others who are not healthy.
즉 도움이 필요한 사람과 함께 나누는 것이 필요하다고 생각합니다.
So in other words, sharing with people who are in need, who needs help.
이것을 도움이 필요한 사람의 정보를 많은 사람들을 알려서 그들도 동참하도록 하고 있습니다.
And share the news of people in need so that many others can also know of them, of their needs, and can help.
사람들은 그런 좋은 마음이 있지만은 뭘 어떻게 해야 될지 잘 모릅니다.
So a lot of people want to help, but they don't know how.
그것을 할 수 있도록 이렇게 길을 열어줘야 합니다.
So create pathways by which they can actually help.
그다음에 이 검소하게 사는 삶, 지나친 소비를 하지 않도록, 사치하지 않도록, 그리고 검소하게 살도록 안내해야 합니다.
And also, we need to guide people and teach them how to live modestly without overconsumption.
그러려면 제가 스스로 그렇게 살아야 합니다.
To do that, I have to be an example, a model.
그런 문제에서 우리가 환경에 대한 인식을 높이는 활동을 하고 있습니다.
So from that perspective, we are working on movements, to educational movement to let people know, become aware of the climate change.
요즘은 저는 부탄에 가서 그런 지속 가능한 삶의 모습, 지속 가능한 개발, CO2 제로가 되는 삶 이런 것을 어떤 지역적으로 하나 개발해 보려고 하는 계획을 갖고 있습니다.
So most recently, I have hatched this, this plan to go to Bhutan and create a model society by which that would have, zero CO2 emission and, be able to live in a sustainable development model.
특히 한반도에서는 지금 군사적 긴장이 높아지고 전쟁의 위험이 있기 때문에 이것을 어떻게 막을 것인가 이런 문제도 하나의 예상적인 관심사입니다.
Also, one of the everyday concerns I always hold is how do we lessen the military tension that's rising in the Korean Peninsula?
특히 그곳에 2,500만의 주민들이 식량 부족이나 약품 부족으로 고통을 겪고 있기 때문에 이 문제를 어떻게 해결할 것인가.
And I always think to the 25 million North Koreans who are actually suffering every day due to lack of food and lack of medicine. So the question, in my mind is how do we solve that?
요즘은 환경위기에 대비해서 이런 식량의 자급자족을 위한 맑은 물, 맑은 공기, 깨끗한 식량을 어떻게 확보할 것인가 이런 문제로 인해서 시골에 가서 농사 지으면서 연구하고 있습니다.
So I'm also, down in the countryside these days, farming and thinking about, in the midst of this environmental crisis, how can we get clean air, clean water, clean food.
이렇게 상을 보내고 있습니다.
So these are basically what, different considerations that make up my everyday life.
Can you adjust the microphone? Just a minute.
I think that's a great question about what gets me up.
굉장히 좋은 질문입니다. 아침에 일어나서 제가 제일 먼저 무엇을 하는지, 무슨 이유로 내가 일어나는지. 그래서 우리의 목적하고 우리가 같이 이렇게 같이 인생을 산다면 더 가벼운 인생을 살 수 있을 것 같습니다.
In the United States, particularly, we live in a very aggressive capitalist culture.
미국에서는
that's
굉장히
very focused on money.
적극적인
We measure
돈
success by financial
위주로
achievement.
그런 사회가 있지 않습니까? 그래서 우리는
You
성공을
can't
한다고
just
돈이
declare I
얼마나
want to
많이
do good,
있냐
and
그거에
they'll give
대해서
you
우리
groceries at
성공을
the store,
정의합니다.
and they won't charge you rent. They'll give you a car. No, Doesn't work that way.
그래서 사람이
So
좋은
one of the
나라에서
areas
좋은
that I'm very
사람이라고
interested in
가가지고
is
뭐
something
공짜로
that
주고
Annabel
차도 공짜로 주고
mentioned
그런 세상이
earlier, which is
아닙니다.
spiritual
우리는.
entrepreneurship.
그래서 내가
And that is
생각해서
where we, in
영적인
this system as it exists now,
그런 사업,
raise
영적인
funds,
안트프레너.
in many cases through selling buildings and so forth in faith communities,
그래서
to create an
사실상 교회
investment
같은
fund
데서
for
건물들,
particularly
있는
younger people
건물들을
who
갖다가
have a vision and a purpose that they
사가지고
want to
자금
accomplish,
모아가지고
but they don't have the
그
financial resources
자금으로서
nor
젊은이들을
the
많이
strategic
돕는
support.
그런 실천도 하고
So that would be
있습니다.
one area I would
그래서
love
젊은이들이
to see. Our faith is very focused on being useful,
이게
and
우리가
that would
우리
be one area.
종교가 얼마나 그런 사람들한테 얼마나 이렇게 실용적으로 그렇게 보탬이 될 수 있는지.
Switch mics.
We can share this mic. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Can they hear with this? We can share this.
Okay. Perfect. So, yeah, one mission that I'm focused on is spiritual entrepreneurship, where you have a program where you develop a person can develop their inner life, and then there are resources that are matched to it so that they can change the world on any of these various issues. Climate change has been mentioned, but that's it's difficult for the people who want to do it. So I'm very excited about spiritual entrepreneurship. The other area that I'm very interested in, and they're very similar really, is overcoming the divide that we have and the contempt that we have in our culture, and creating a better way to respect diversity, have more inclusion across differences. And I'd love to see that in the business world. I'd love to see that in the faith communities. I'd love to see it in our political system. But we have to learn new ways to overcome differences. And so those would be the areas: spiritual entrepreneurship and overcoming differences through training and understanding.
Is that working now? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for persisting. So I have one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. So the last question I have is about love. And I know that, Rich, you and I have talked a lot about love. Because I had this revelation, I guess, some years ago, that I feel like we as a society overemphasize romantic love over other forms of love, and there's such a variety of love. And I decided that for me, I wanted to really explore just the entire spectrum and not focus on romantic love. And I feel like it's really changed my life, and I'm definitely happier as a result. But I wanted to ask about what you think love is, and is it important to pursue it? And what kind of love should we be pursuing?
그리고 어떤 방식의 어떤 타입의 사랑을 우리가 쫓아야 되는지 그걸 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
You're going to show me a little love.
사랑을
Let me go first.
보여주셨네요, 선생님께서.
Yes. Well, I believe God is love, and I believe it's the most important force in the world. Very often in our faith community, I will use words like compassion, or kindness, or empathy, because love is so overused as a phrase, and it has multiple meanings in English. It can be romantic love, it can be the love of brotherly love or sisterly love, but I do believe it's the most important force of the universe. I think that to the degree that we tap into it, we're tapping into the flow of the universe, so I do see it as the most important thing. I do realize the word means many things to many people, but I'm talking about the ability to love others. And the only way you can really love God is demonstrated by your ability to love others. And that, I think, is our spiritual quest through our whole life. So that would be my view of love. That's how I see it. And I do think it's the most important thing. And to evolve, to solve all the issues that we're talking about, climate change, poverty, North-South Korea that we're mentioning tonight, those, we're going to keep trying to bring mechanistic solutions to it, but it is going to be from the heart. It's going to be compassion and an evolution spiritually, I think, in the world to overcome these things. We can't solve those problems from the old ways that we operate.
무엇을 사랑이라 할 거냐, 이 정의가 다르기 때문에 사랑이 뭐다라고 말하기는 어려울 것 같습니다.
It's going to be very difficult to say what love is because definition of love really differs.
우리가 누군가를 사랑한다는 것이 본인에게는 사랑인지 모르지만은 타인이 그걸 싫어한다면 그것은 그 사람에게 있어서는 큰 고통입니다.
If I like somebody, that's love from my perspective. If the other person doesn't reciprocate those feelings, then it becomes suffering for the other person.
또 내가 누군가를 사랑한다고 하지만은 상대가 나를 사랑하지 않을 때는 내가 굉장히 고통이 됩니다.
Also, I may love somebody, but if the other person doesn't love me, that becomes a source of suffering for me.
그래서 사랑이 미움의 원인이 되기도 합니다.
So in that real sense, love becomes a seed to hatred.
그래서 저는 굳이 사랑을 좋은 의미에서 정의한다면요.
But if we had to come up with a definition of love that's positive,
이해라고 생각합니다.
I think it's understanding.
나와 다른 그 사람이 해서 그 입장에서는 그럴 수도 있겠다는 겁니다.
So understanding that, okay, you probably, it could be from your perspective.
즉 내가 그의 상태를 다 안다는 것이 아니라 나와 다른 것에 대한 인정과 난 자세히는 모르지만 그 사람 입장에서는 그럴 수도 있겠다 하는 이해가 사랑이라고 생각합니다.
Not necessarily fully understanding, where the other person is coming from, but just acknowledging that they are coming from a different place and, acknowledging their differences.
이해가 안 될 때 마음에서 미움이 생기고 또 증오가 일어납니다.
Because lack of understanding leads to hatred and, leads to hate.
또 그렇기 때문에 이해 없는 사랑은 폭력입니다.
So love without understanding is violence.
그래서 저는 상대에 대한 깊은 이해가 가장 중요하다고 생각합니다.
So I think the most important thing is a deep understanding of the other.
그 이해라는 것이 그의 상태를 내가 다 알아야 된다는 게 아니고요.
And not understanding, by understanding, I don't mean you have to know 100% of what the other person is.
잘 모르지만은 그 사람 입장에서는 그럴 수도 있겠다라는 것을 이해하는 겁니다.
But understanding that, okay, it could be so from your perspective.
그럴 때 내가 화가 나지 않게 되고요.
Because then I don't get angry.
미움이 생기지 않고요.
I don't hate.
또 그를 지켜봐 줄 수가 있습니다.
And I'm allowed to, and I'm able to observe the other person.
오늘 우리는 이것이 부족합니다.
But we lack all these.
그리고 또 내가 누군가를 좋아할 때도
For example, if I like somebody,
우리는 좋아하는 데서 미움이 생기는 게 아니라 좋아하니까 니도 나를 좋아해라 하는 그 기대에 못 미칠 때 섭섭함이 생기고 미움이 생깁니다.
so the hatred doesn't come because the other person doesn't love me. The hatred comes because of my own expectation of reciprocity of my feelings towards the other person.
사랑하기 때문에 미움이 생기는 게 아니라 사랑받으려고 하는 데서 미움이 생긴다는 거죠.
So it's not loving the other that creates hatred. It's your desire to be loved that creates the hatred.
그렇기 때문에 사랑하는 것으로 끝나야지 받으려고 하는 생각을 버릴 때 저는 미움이 일어나지 않는 사랑이라고 생각합니다.
So love without hatred is when you love the other without any expectations of to be loved in return.
내가 그를 좋아하는 것은 내 자유지만 그가 나를 좋아하는 것은 그의 자유입니다.
Because I am free to love the other person, but the other person is also free to love or not love me.
그걸 인정해야 합니다.
You have to acknowledge that.
그런데 우리는 내가 사랑했다는 이유로 너도 나를 사랑해라는 것을 강요하고 있습니다.
But we demand love from others just because we love the others.
상대에게 자유를 뺏는 거나 다름없습니다.
So we actually wrest freedom from the other.
Interesting. So I'm going to open up to questions from the audience. Oh,
좀 관심이 질문이 있는지 일단
okay, David.
여쭙겠습니다.
So first of all, thank you, Annabel, for inviting me, and thank you all for your wonderful insights today. It's been really enlightening and wonderful to hear a lot of what Annabel and I and a bunch of my friends have been talking about for some time. How do you deal in this crazy world? And the past few years, I've been going my own personal transformation. And just yesterday, I posted something on my Facebook page that elicited a reaction from somebody. I don't want to say what they said because I'm in a church. It was not nice. And at first I took a breath and I said, "Is everything okay at home?" And all they responded with was meds. That's all they said, meds. And I said, "That sounds like a really good idea." And they said, "Agreed." And that's it. And I said, "I sincerely hope you find compassion and peace within yourself." And no response. So I guess what I've learned, very similar to what you've been saying, is that hurt people hurt people. And when people are hurting others, they're actually hurting within themselves. So I'm trying and frequently failing, but this time I didn't fail, thankfully, to be compassionate to them. But I was only able to do that because I've been more compassionate with myself first. So I just wanted to share that with you as you're talking. It literally just happened like yesterday, so I wanted to share that with you.
My only response would be that just what I love about that story is you took the critical step of pausing before responding and just had a little bit of compassion for someone who wasn't being kind to you and said, "I wonder what world they're in. I'm trying to see it from their perspective." And that's very hard to do. But I think that is the way, that is the secret. Like, just pause. How are they seeing it? And the work you were saying you've done on yourself prepared you for this. I think that's a very practical thing that we can all do. Just pause and just say to ourselves, "I wonder where they're coming from on that." Assuming that they're a bad person as the first thing that we do, which is normal, it doesn't work. But I really love the practice that you're teaching us.
코멘트 하신 거니까 굳이 그걸 말을 안 해도 되겠다.
Oh, okay. So,
그분이 자기를 소감을 얘기한 거니까.
okay. Since he shared his own story, he doesn't need to. It's not a question, so he doesn't need to respond, right?
Okay. So, oh, sorry. He has the mic.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi. So I have a question. So it's really about because there are those people who really want to and can and have dedicated their lives to helping others. But it seems that for average people, helping others in your community used to be kind of a built-in practical part of what it meant to live your life. Because just by virtue of having to survive, your activities, your place in the community was a matter, your community doing well was a matter of your own survival. But as society has developed and we become more prosperous in a sense, that automaticity kind of isn't built into it. Average people don't necessarily need to, they can go and they can do work and they can receive wages and they can directly kind of just live their lives separately. They don't need to help others. So my question is, and this is something I'm wondering, for those who aren't dedicating their lives, their calling isn't to dedicate their lives to helping others, how do we build in, for normal average people, how do we build in caring and loving others and caring for them, if that makes sense? Thank you.
자기가 진 짐이 무거우면 남을 돕고 싶어도 도울 수가 없습니다.
If your burden's too heavy, you might want to help others, but you can't.
자기 짐이 무거우면 남 보고 도와달라고 합니다.
And if your burden's too heavy, you're likely to ask others for help, actually.
대부분 우리는 남 보고 도와달라고 하잖아요.
And most of us, ask others for help.
안 되면 사람에게 기대가 안 되면 하나님이나 부처님에게도 도와달라고 하지 않습니까?
And if we don't get what we want from others, we ask Buddha or we ask God to give us what we want.
근데 어떻게 남을 돕겠습니까?
So in that state, how can you help others?
첫째, 자기의 무거운 짐을 내려놔야 합니다.
So first and foremost, you have to let down your burden.
자기가 가벼워져야 합니다.
You have to become lighter.
그래야 도울 수 있는 능력이 생깁니다.
Only then do you have the capacity to help others.
남을 돕는 것은 의무사항은 아닙니다.
Because it's not mandated that you have to help others.
우리가 그러니까 어미가 어린 새끼는 돕는 것은 하나의 생태계에서의 의무에 속합니다.
So, a parent taking care of their young when they're young is, a duty of a parent if you look at the ecosystem, right?
그건 종족 보존의 법칙입니다.
And it has to do with preservation of the species.
그것을 넘어서면 각각의 생명은 자기 생명을 자기가 보존해야 합니다.
But beyond that, each individual life is on its own. It's responsible for its own life.
이것이 자연계의 현상입니다.
And that's what we see in nature.
그런데 사람은 어려운 사람을 돕는 경우가 있습니다.
But as human beings, sometimes exhibit, this compassion and they help others.
그것은 좋은 일입니다.
So that's a good thing.
그러나 그것은 의무는 아닙니다.
But it's not a duty. It's not something mandated of us.
자신의 선택이죠.
It becomes your choice to help.
그럼 어떤 도움을 줄 거냐?
So then the question becomes, what kind of help do I give?
내가 그냥 도와주겠다 하는 것은 상대에게 거꾸로 고통이 될 수도 있고 무거운 짐이 될 수도 있습니다.
Because arbitrarily helping others can actually be burdensome or cause more suffering.
필요한 것을 도와야 합니다.
So you have to help others on what they need.
그러나 그가 필요하다고 내가 다 도울 수도 없습니다.
But just because they need so much, you can't fulfill all their needs.
첫째, 필요한 것을 도와줘야 된다는
So
거.
first, you have to help others on what they need
내가 할 수 있는 만큼 하면 됩니다.
and help others to your own capacity.
너무 남을 돕겠다고 하다가 자기가 다시 돕는다는 무거운 짐을 지고 괴로워하는 사람도 있습니다.
Because there are people who actually suffer and who have reburdened themselves with this need to help others. They have actually become heavier.
내 생명이 소중하듯이 내 삶이 소중하듯이 다른 사람의 삶도 소중합니다.
Just as my life is precious, others' lives are also precious.
동시에 다른 사람의 삶이 소중하듯이 내 삶도 소중합니다.
But conversely, just as others' life is precious, my own life is precious.
남의 고통을 덜어주는 것도 필요하지만은 그것이 자기 고통이 되어서는 안 됩니다.
So it's good for you to listen. It's needed for you to listen and relieve others' suffering, but that should not be your own suffering.
자기의 고통을 도 없애야 합니다.
Because you need to also eradicate your own suffering.
그런 관점에서 저는 좀 가벼운 마음으로 도왔으면 좋겠습니다.
So in that sense, any help you want to give others, I want you to begin with a kind of a lighter heart.
너무 많이 도우려고 하기 때문에 거꾸로 돕지를 못하는 경우가 많습니다.
Sometimes we want to help too much that prevents us from helping at all.
또 그러지 못한 자신에 대해서 죄의식을 갖는 사람도 있습니다.
And we often feel guilty because we're not helping as much as we like to.
저는 그런 것으로부터 좀 더 벗어나서 자유로웠으면 좋겠습니다.
So I want you to escape those and be much freer.
The only thing I would just add very quickly is one of the illusions, I think, in our culture is that there's people out there who are going to do good and I'm going to do my business. And I think that's it's an illusion. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, there's a chance to do good. And the idea of outsourcing good to others, like through donations or philanthropy or those other good people over there doing good things, is an illusion. I believe that getting outside of yourself and helping others is healthy for you, much more than it is for the other person. So, getting out of a selfish mindset and that I can outsource doing good actually hurts the person who's in the system and justifies it that way. That would be my take.
Hello, thank you for coming. I'm glad to see you again. So I don't know how to say. So you guys are talking about how world are really confusing and chaotic, and everybody has a different opinion. In U.S. population is, I believe, that 340 millions. So it is normal. Everybody has different opinions. So nowadays, I find myself silencing myself not sharing my opinion, because whenever I share opinion about politically or socially, they think that you're the enemy. So it used to be the long time ago, it was the acceptance. I accept you who you are. You live your life, I live my life. But nowadays, if I don't support you or advocate for you, you are my enemy, you are a bad person. So the other day, I had my friend who's from Iraq. He actually shared the experience with his opinion about the LGBT, a gay community. He was expressing his opinion in front of a lot of people in the theater. So I told him, don't do it. You're going to lose your job. So nowadays, I find myself, you have to refrain yourself sharing your opinion. So what can I do? Should I keep silencing myself, not sharing my opinion, and listen to other people? Yeah, you might be right, and just walk away. Thank you.
동의하지 않는데 좀 맞을 수가 있었고 그냥 걸어갈까 아니면 내 자신을 자꾸 검열하는 그런 현상이 보입니다.
지금 질문자가 얘기한 그런 세상이라면 저는 좋은 세상이라고 생각합니다.
Actually, the world you just described, I think that's a good world.
왜냐하면
And the reason is
지저스 크라이스트가 될 수 있는 시대이기 때문에.
because it's an era that invites, re-emergence of Jesus Christ.
지저스 크라이스트는 바른 말을 하고 십자가에 못 박혔지 않습니까?
So Christ got crucified for saying the right things.
뭐가 두렵습니까?
So what are you afraid of?
그러니까 지금 십자가에 못 박지는 않을 거예요.
Because these days, at least they won't crucify you.
그냥 비난 좀 하지.
They'll sometimes criticize you. That's all.
그러니까 비난이 두려우면 말을 하지 말든지.
And if you're afraid of criticism, then you should silence yourself.
그걸 두려워하면서 무슨 정의를 얘기합니까?
How can you speak of justice when you're afraid of little criticism?
그래서 그것은 세상 문제가 아니라 자기 문제입니다.
So it's not the world's problem, it's your problem.
세상이 자꾸 자기가 원하는 대로 됐으면 합니다.
Because people always want the world to work the way you want it to work.
세상은 저절로 변하지 않습니다.
Because the world doesn't change on its own.
우리가 그것을 원한다면 우리는 그렇게 가도록 해야 합니다.
Because if we want the world to change a certain direction, then we have to push in that direction.
거기에서 따르는 어떤 손실이 있다면 감수해야 합니다.
And there are sacrifices that's required for that change.
왜 대가를 지불하지 않으려 합니까?
Why don't you want to pay the price?
돈이 손해나면 손해를 감수해야 되고요.
And if there are economic losses, you have to live with it.
비난이 따르면 비난을
If
받아야
there are
되고요.
criticism, then you have to accept it.
감옥에 가야 된다면 가야죠.
And you have to go to jail, then you should willingly go to jail.
그러나 죽지는 않으니까 예수님보다는 낫다 이렇게 생각하세요.
But at least you won't get killed for it, crucified for it, so you're better off than Jesus.
조금 적극적으로
So I
생각하세요.
want you to think more proactively.
앉아서 계속 이렇게 불평만 하고 있어서는 아무 일도 못합니다.
Because just sitting down and complaining, you won't do anything.
그러나 내 주장을 함부로 얘기해서 상대를 자극할 필요는 없습니다.
But at the same time, you shouldn't opine, you shouldn't share your opinion just to kind of stimulate the other or just to rile the other.
갈등을 유발할 필요는 없죠.
You don't have to proactively cause conflicts.
그러나 갈등을 두려워해서도 안 됩니다.
But at the same time, you shouldn't be afraid of conflicts.
저는 적극적으로 임했으면 좋겠다고
So I
생각합니다.
want you to be more forward-leaning.
지금의 사회는 너무 안일합니다.
Because I think this world, this society is a little too stale or too static.
세상에 문제가 있다면서도 아무런 행동을 하려고 하지 않습니다.
Because everybody agrees there are problems, but no one wants to do anything about it.
투표도 안 합니다.
They don't even vote.
그러면서 정치를 요구합니까?
So what can you ask of the politician when you don't vote?
조금 더 적극적으로 임했으면 좋겠다는 말씀을 드립니다.
So I think we all have to be more forward-leaning in our own world.
I like that. Be ready to go to jail.
감옥에 갈 준비가 돼 있으면 됩니다.
I do a lot of speaking on college campuses, and to your point, the students no longer ask questions in a group like you just are doing. They line up. And I ask them, why didn't you ask the question? The group would have benefited. And they invariably say, oh, I never share my opinion. in the group, it could destroy my career. And these are 18, 19-year-olds, and they've learned this lesson in our culture now. And the phrase that I often hear is, keep your head down and your mouth shut, and then you'll get by. And so I would say two approaches. One, there's a history in the world of people trying to destroy people they disagree with. In Christianity, we have very embarrassing history where not that long ago, if you had the wrong view on a theological point, you could be executed. So that is the most vicious example of intolerance of a different viewpoint. And we, in Christianity, did that for centuries. But today, we don't kill people so much, but we do cancel people. And we try to destroy their livelihood, and we try to destroy them. It's the same evil energy that was what called people witches or heretics. It's a way of saying that I need to destroy you because you have the wrong beliefs. The tough answer, though, I think is, and we're in complete agreement, is that when you acquiesce to that and you keep your mouth shut and you keep your head down, you empower the bullies who will intimidate people into silence. And so much of our culture is now intimidated into silence and not sharing its views or seeking to conform to whatever the group is just to keep their head down. There's an expression that the nail that's sticking up gets hammered. People don't want to be that nail. They want to just keep things. So I do think it does take courage. I think we are all complex. We have a lot of complex viewpoints, and we should I think it's a good spiritual exercise to articulate them and watch who your friends are. Watch the reaction. Strategically, I'd also, not only did Jesus die on the cross, but he also had a phrase, which is, don't throw your pearls before swine's feet. And what that means is, there's some times where it's not worth engaging. And some people are just what I call conflict entrepreneurs. Their whole thing is to get a rile out of you. And when you respond with your opinion, you've just fed the flames, but nothing is going to come of it. So I think you have to ask yourself when someone's asking your opinion, are they doing this because they are curious? Am I curious? Or is this an opportunity to threaten me or dominate or cancel? And I think you just have to weigh it. I don't think you have to answer to everybody in every situation, in every meeting, and say your opinion. But at the same time, when you're really submerging your views that you feel is right, one of the dangers is you might be wrong, and that view will stay with you because it wasn't challenged. So just speak. One of the most spiritually liberating things that we can do is not conform to what the world is asking us to be and not care what people think. And I realize there are repercussions, but in my experience, it's a much better life, and it doesn't usually lead to jail, doesn't usually lead to financial ruin. It usually leads to happier life, and people actually respect you. But I think you have to weigh out. But it is a sad state that students are unwilling to raise their hand because they feel that they could destroy their career by asking the wrong question in a place that's set up to ask questions. So it is a crisis.
Hi, I have two slightly unrelated points. I just read today that in our neighborhood there's going to be a coffee on Monday, and the rules are you can talk about anything except religion and politics. And if I was writing the rules, I might even suggest this to them, I would say all conversations are to be conducted in a respectful, loving manner, and you agree in advance that if it shifts, if it derails from those two goals, you'll stop and switch the subject. And my second question is specific to Korea, and that is, are there any good things that the United States has done about the Korean situation in recent years? And if you were controlling the U.S. government, what would you have our government do that it's not doing?
만약 스님께서 미국을 지금 정부를 운영한다면 어떤 그 조치를 취했으면 한국에 도움이 될지 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
그럼 첫 번째 거는 목사님이 하시고 두 번째 건 제가 하겠습니다.
So I'll take the second part of the question, and the Reverend can respond to your first part of your comments.
지금 한반도에는 군사적 긴장이 고조되고 있습니다.
So the tension on the peninsula is ratcheting up.
가장 큰 위험은 북한의 대량살상 무기 확산입니다.
The biggest risk, the danger, is the expansion of WMDs by North Korea.
근데 현재 거기에 대응하기 위해서 한국과 미국과 일본이 군사적 협력을 하는 것은 안보적 차원에서는 의미가 있지만은 그 확산을 막을 수는 없습니다. 오히려 부추기고 있습니다.
So to defend against that, the trilateral military cooperation among the U.S., South Korea, and Japan is good enough to defend against the potential threat from the north, but it's not good enough to stop any expansion of their WMD arsenal.
북한은 어려움에 처하니까 러시아와 협력을 합니다.
And because North Korea has been in dire straits, they are now cooperating with Russia.
러시아의 군사 기술이 제공된다면 훨씬 더 확산이 됩니다.
And if any military kind of technology is transferred from Russia and North Korea, it will facilitate and expedite, the sophistication of North Korea's arsenal.
이것을 계속 내버려 둘 거냐는 겁니다.
So the question becomes, are we going to let this situation be?
지금 작은 힘으로 해결할 것을 나중에는 큰 힘으로도 해결할 수가 없습니다.
Because if we don't intervene now, then it may be too late down the line.
옛날에는 북한이 고립되어 있었습니다.
So in previous years, North Korea had been isolated.
그들은 미국과의 대화를 통해서 생존을 하려고 했습니다.
So the only way for them their way out had to go through the U.S. at that time.
미국은 그래서 북한을 이리저리 다룰 수가 있었습니다.
So it was possible for the U.S. to kind of manage using different strategies to manage North Korea.
그때도 그래도 쉽지 않았습니다.
Even then, it was difficult.
그런데 지금은 어려워졌습니다.
But right now, it's more difficult.
북한은 이제 중국과 러시아라고 하는 자신의 배후가 생겼습니다.
Because right now, North Korea has its supporters, great powers in China and Russia.
미국의 대화를 목매달 필요가 없어졌습니다.
So U.S. is not their only option anymore.
그렇기 때문에 우리는 지금까지 해온 방식과 다른 방식으로 접근해야 합니다.
So in this new environment, we have to approach the situation with a new method, new strategy.
첫째, 북한의 대량살상 무기 확산이 위험이 되느냐 안 되느냐를 먼저 살펴야 합니다.
One, we have to kind of confirm to ourselves whether North Korea's WMD arsenal is an actual threat to us or not.
안 된다면 뭐 괜찮습니다.
If it's not a threat, then it's okay.
만약에 위험이 커지고 있다면
But if the threat is increasing,
문제를 해결해야 합니다.
then we have to solve it.
옛날에는 핵 폐기를 주장했습니다.
Before, we insisted on complete denuclearization.
그러나 지금은 그 문제로서는 해결할 수가 없습니다.
But right now, that's not going to work.
위험을 멈추게 하려면 일단은 확산을 막아야 합니다.
Because first and foremost, we have to stop the program.
동결시켜야 한다는 거죠.
Basically, in other words, freeze the program.
뭘 제공해야 할 것인가?
So in return for freeze, what can we offer them?
북한이 지금까지 줄기차게 요구한 것은 적대시 정책의 철폐입니다.
So North Korea has been consistent in what they want. They want the U.S. to withdraw its hostile policies.
즉 북한은 유엔에 가입된 국가입니다.
So North Korea is a UN member state.
미국과 일본은 아직 국가로 인정하지 않고 있습니다.
But the U.S. and Japan do not recognize them as an autonomous independent state.
그들이 생각할 때는 자기들을 붕괴시키려고 한다고 우려하고 있는 겁니다.
So from North Korean perspective, they're afraid that U.S. and Japan is always constantly trying to undermine and implode them.
국가로 인정해야 합니다.
So you have to recognize them as a country
관계 정상화를 해야 합니다.
and normalize the relationship.
이러한 제안을 통해서 북한의 핵 동결을 추동해야 합니다.
And through such proposal, you have to, kind of incentivize them to freeze their program.
많은 사람들은 북한이 약속을 지킬 것이냐, 동결의 약속을 지킬 것이냐 이런 우려를 합니다.
Of course, many people are concerned whether North Korea is going to live up to their freeze promise.
우리가 약속을 할 때는 지킬지 안 지킬지 모릅니다.
But when we make a promise in general, we don't know whether the other side is going to keep the promise or not.
첫째는 지킬 거라고 믿고 하는 거고요.
In the beginning, you trust that they will keep it.
두 번째는 지키지 않을 때는 어떤 페널티를 가지고 우리가 약속을 하지 않습니까?
But in case that they don't actually keep their promise, there's a verification and there's punishment there.
네, 그렇기 때문에 그것이 내버려 두는 것보다는 훨씬 위험을 줄인다는 겁니다.
So that actually is easier to manage, and we can mitigate the risk more by having a promise in place.
그래서 저는 북한의 이러한 러시아와 북한의 군사적 협력은 한국뿐만 아니라 일본의 안보에도 큰 위협이 된다고 생각합니다.
So the military cooperation between North Korea and Russia is not only a threat to South Korea but to Japan as well.
그리고 지금 한국과 일본과 미국의 특히 한일 간의 협력에 대해서 한국 안에서 국민적 지지는 약합니다.
So and also another aspect is that right now the close cooperation between South Korea, the rapprochement between South Korea and Japan, does not enjoy majority support in South Korea.
만약에 정권이 바뀐다면 이것은 되돌아갈 수 있습니다.
So if the government changes, that relationship can go backwards again.
그렇기 때문에 이걸 안정적으로 유지하려면 북한 문제를 풀어야 합니다.
So if you want to maintain and sustain the newly found positive relationship between Japan and South Korea, you got to resolve the North Korean issue.
즉 한국의 입장에서는 일본 문제만 푸는 게 아니라 북한 문제까지 풀므로 해서 한국 정부가 바뀐다 하더라도 안정적으로 갈 수가 있습니다.
So the current Korean government needs not only to resolve the relationship with Japan, but also the relationship with North Korea to sustain their new policies.
이것은 한국 정부에게도 이익입니다.
This is a benefit to South Korean.
과거를 묻지 않고 일본만 푼 게 아니라 과거를 묻지 않고 북한까지 풀므로 해서 편중됐다는 인식에서 벗어날 수 있습니다.
Because they were able to resolve the relationship with Japan because they decided to be more future oriented in their relationship and not be beholden by the past. If they take the same tack with North Korea, then they can actually maintain that balance.
또 한국과 일본과 미국의 이 협력을 지속적으로 유지할 수 있습니다.
And the new trilateral relationship among Japan and U.S. and South Korea can be sustained.
이것은 미국이 원하는 바입니다.
And that is what the U.S. wants too.
또 북한이 중국과 러시아와의 결합하는 것을 북한을 끌어내므로 해서 이 결합의 정도를 줄일 수가 있습니다.
You could also, by using that, incentivize North Korea to move away, from that close relationship from China and Russia.
그것은 동북아의 평화를 위해서 매우 중요합니다.
That's very important factor to mitigating any dangers in Northeast Asia.
이익만 있고 손실이 없는데 왜 하지 않는지는 잘 모르겠습니다.
So I'm not really sure because all these are benefits, the pros, and there are not a lot of cons. So I don't know why people are not pursuing this strategy.
그것은 북한에 대한 어떤 적적이 악마화하는 북한을 이렇게 나쁘게 생각하는 그 관점에서 마치 이것이 북한에게 양보하는 것 같은 잘못된 생각을 하기 때문입니다.
So I think that comes about because we have demonized North Korea so much that any kind of engagement, any kind of deal with North Korea is seen as a compromise, as a weakness.
좀 더 실용적으로 접근하는 것이 필요하다고
I think we need to be more practical in our approach.
그러나 제가 정책을 담당하는 사람이 아니다 보니까 아이디어는 있지만은 해결할 길은 없습니다.
So, but since I'm not a policymaker or decision maker, I have ideas, but no way to actually actualize them.
To your first question about the coffee shop, 3 things you shouldn't talk about at dinner parties, right? Politics, religion, and sex. So they didn't include sex in this. The 3 most interesting things to talk about at a coffee shop. So you're right. They should have a place of respect. We should be able to talk about our faith or our political views, and by making rules like that, we're not developing those skills. My only comment on the Korean situation is what we're doing now is not working. I say we collectively, the United States, but it's just not working. And that's isolation and increasing military strategy. I understand why. But when something's not working, you have to try something else. And when you try something else, everybody's going to laugh at it or say it's weak or it's stupid. That's how all change takes place. But we're at a moment, I think, it is probably one of the most dangerous situations in the world, and that we're going to have to rethink it. And I think that some of the way that was mentioned here is probably something that all political leaders should consider as well. We should think about how to make it politically palatable to reimagine, because you have to talk to people you don't like to bring about peace.
Yeah, I'm struck by Venerable saying that love is understanding, and I think that we don't really understand North Korea, and so we're okay hating North Korea, but I think if we could get beyond that, not being okay just hating them, but really trying to understand that, I think that is what would help us have some kind of breakthrough.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. A concept that has brought me a lot of serenity in past years is defense is the first act of war. And I look at faith-based organizations, and I don't find a great deal of support for a concept like that, that defense is an act of war. And I wonder if the two of you believe in that concept, then what do you see as faith leaders moving towards that, if at all?
I'm not sure I agree with the principle in that there is going to be violence and bad actors in the world, and I think we have a right to defend ourselves. So if someone robbed me in the street tonight, I would defend myself. I don't think that's an act of war against the person. I think that's a reaction. I think where you have to be careful, particularly in the military, is where defense becomes an aggressive act, and you're the aggressor, but you're calling it defense. Or if you're provocative in a situation, and you're saying, well, I'm just defending myself, but you've provoked the situation. I think you have to be aware of that nuance. But so I'm not sure if I would go with defense is an act, an act of violence. But I think, if you're talking in military terms, the United States has to be very careful when it says we're just defending, and as was just mentioned, we could be escalating, and then that does drive the other side to escalate, and that is an act of war. But let's ask the expert.
방어도 폭력이다 하는 것은 부다의 가르침의 입장에서 보면 그렇습니다.
So from Buddha's Dharma teaching perspective, what you say defense can be an act of violence is true.
어떤 방어라는 이름으로도 폭력적으로 대응해서는 안 된다는 겁니다.
So what he taught is that you can't use violence, no matter what, by using defense as an excuse.
그러나 현실에서는 참 쉽지 않는 일입니다.
But it's a very difficult thing to apply in everyday life.
그래서 저는 목사님이 말씀하신 대로 방어라는 이름으로 적대성을 부추겨서는 안 된다고 생각합니다.
So I agree with the Reverend in saying that we can't use defense as an excuse to increase, mutual hatred.
대표적으로 스위스 같은 나라입니다.
For example, like Switzerland.
아주 방어 시스템이 견고합니다.
Their defense system is very tight.
그러나 어떤 나라에도 적대적이지는 않습니다.
But they're not hostile to any country.
적대적이면서 방어적인 행위는 저는 폭력적인 공격의 전쟁 행위의 일부다 하는 것에 일부 동의합니다.
So I kind of partially agree with you. So any defense that rises out of a hostility is an act of war.
Hello, and thank you for everything tonight. I've really enjoyed the discussion. What do you think is the biggest threat to mindfulness? I guess you would say in current day, and is it becoming any harder for people to experience it via the way that our lives are changing with technology and politics and things like that? Do you think that you can access it the same way, or is it becoming harder for people to stay in touch with that? Thank you.
옛날보다 좀 힘들어졌습니다.
Yes, I think it is becoming more difficult today.
옛날은 욕망을 절제하는 것을 미덕으로 생각했습니다. 미덕으로.
Because in the past, suppressing or controlling, disciplining your own desire was considered a good thing.
지금은 뭐든지 자기 욕망을 따르는 것을 굉장히 이렇게 장려하는 입장입니다.
But today we encourage people to actually follow and amplify their desires.
그렇기 때문에 자신이 욕망에 휩싸여 있다는 걸 알아차리기가 더 어려워졌어요.
So in that world, it's very difficult for you to wake up to the fact that you are being surrounded by your own desires.
두 번째는 자기의 어떤 취향이나 기질이나 지 하고 싶은 대로 뭘 하는 거를 자유라는 이름으로 굉장히 권장하고 있습니다.
And these days, we also encourage people under the guise of freedom to pursue and to do whatever they want, however they want, based on their, natural tendencies.
그러다 보니까 성질대로 자기가 화가 나거나 짜증이 나갈 때 성질대로 하는 것을 알아차리기가 어려워졌습니다.
So in that sense, it's become very difficult for you to be mindful of your own tendencies or your own emotions because you're used to doing whatever you want, expressing however you want.
세 번째는 자기 생각이 옳다는 것도 옛날보다 더 강해졌습니다.
And third, I think our sense of my own righteousness has become stronger.
서로 다름을 인정하는 것이 아니라 자기의 관점에서 타인을 다르다, 틀렸다고 생각합니다.
Instead of acknowledging differences among us, we tend to judge others by how wrong they are, how deviant they are from my own beliefs.
이때 순간적으로 무지가 일어나는 것입니다.
Because that's when you trigger that sudden moment of ignorance.
즉 잘못 알고 있는 것을 알고 있다고 이렇게 확신하고 있습니다.
To be firm in your wrong beliefs that you're right.
이런 것이 알아차림을 어렵게 만들고
So all
있습니다.
these are factors that detract from your ability to access mindfulness.
그래서 욕망에 대해서 이 세상을 내가 욕망대로 다 할 수 없다는 걸 알아야 합니다.
So first, you have to realize that you can't do everything you want according to your desires.
적절한 자제를 통해서 만족을 얻어야 합니다.
You have to be able to be self-satisfied based on a certain discipline of your desires.
자기 성질대로 다 할 수가 없습니다.
Also, you can't act out however you want in this world.
상태와 조절을 해야 합니다.
Because you have to kind of modulate your behavior depending on the context and others.
그런 데서 자신을 알아차려야 합니다.
And you have to kind of be mindful of yourself in that.
자기의 견해도 마찬가지입니다.
Same thing with your own opinions.
다른 사람의 의견도 존중해야 합니다.
You have to be able to respect others as well.
이런 조금의 노력을 한다면 저는 알아차림을 유지할 수 있다고 생각합니다.
But with all these, little efforts that you put in across these, different pillars, I think it is possible to sustain your mindfulness.
학교 교육을 통해서 어떤 근본적인 무지는 많이 해결이 됐습니다.
Through schooling, through the mandated schooling, we have resolved some kind of ignorance, a lot of the ignorance based on, lack of knowledge.
우주의 운행에 대해서든 우주의 운행에 대해서든
So we know all about how the universe functions.
비가 오는 이유든
we know why the rain comes.
생물에 대해서든
We know a lot
병에
about
대해서든
biology, pathology,
정신작용에
or
대해서든
mental functions.
사실은 많이 옛날에 모르던 것을 많이 알게 됐습니다.
So we actually know a lot more than we used to know in the past.
그러나 자기 생각이 옳다는 데 사로잡히기 때문에 보이는 게 없게 됩니다.
But then we blind ourselves by thinking that we're always right.
그래서 많은 환경이 개선됐음에도 이 알아차림이 더 어려워진 게 현실입니다.
So despite the improvement in education, accessing and sustaining mindfulness has become more difficult, and that's the reality.
I agree with all that. I'd add one thing, which is that the technology of the cell phone has, I think, really transformed our world, and it's almost a god. We worship at it. This might be one of the longest times today, sitting up here, that I haven't checked my phone. So it's an addiction that everybody is facing in the United States right now, and we're seeing younger people who are coming into college without social skills because they've communicated on screens their whole life. And if you want to look at it from a spiritual perspective, I believe God speaks to us, angels speak to us, but they can't speak to us if we're not listening. And I notice that if I have a few minutes in line somewhere, I pull out my phone and check messages or do something like there's no downtime. And that no downtime doesn't allow spiritual guidance to come in, or other thoughts or reflections or self-review. So I do think that technology is also, we're experimenting on this younger generation, and it's not going well. Anxiety rates and suicide rates among Gen Z are skyrocketing. And I think it's directly related to lack of mindfulness based on an addiction to technology. We'll have to work out.
Do we have any more questions? No? Anyone? No? Okay. Oh, yeah, one more question. This is my sister Linda.
Hello. I had a very negative question, but I'm not going to ask that one. I'm going to ask a positive question. So I feel, personally for me, and I think I noticed this with other people, that since the pandemic, that we've actually really kind of changed our mindset or our worldview, our habits, so that rather than being focused on consumerism, buying more material goods or whatever, that we're much more focused on gaining experience in life. Like I think about that even with my family. Like I don't want to buy that big TV. I'd rather spend the money to go somewhere with my family, right? So I think that's, I don't think it's just me. I noticed that amongst the younger people as well. So I feel like that's like a change in worldview coming from that trauma of having experienced a pandemic. I don't know what you think about that.
I think that the fallout from the pandemic is mixed. I think there's some bad habits that have come out of it. Like violence, we're seeing more violence and more. And I think also, I had always hoped, and I preached during the pandemic, that I thought it was a spiritual reset to the point you're making. I'm not sure I'm right about that, because I don't know if that's holding what you're describing. So I hope that's true. The people have reassessed what's important. They certainly did in the pandemic, but it seems like there's almost a rush to go back to an older way because we're comfortable with it and it's normal. So I'm a little disappointed in some ways with the reaction to the pandemic, but I hope that you're right, that people have reassessed what's important, and we don't need so much, of those things. That would be my take on it.
목사님 말씀에 전적으로 동의합니다.
I completely agree with what the Reverend said.
만약에 좀 더 지속이 됐다면 환경 문제라든지 또 우리 삶에 많은 변화가 왔을 것 같습니다.
But if the COVID era, might have been longer, so it might have brought about, foundational changes to our lives and environment.
이게 3년 지나면서 바로 돌아가니까 참았다가 이게 터지니까 더 과거로 더 세게 돌아가는 것 같아요.
But it was 3 years, and we had suppressed our kind of old habits for 3 years. Now that it was released, we were released. I think we're rushing back to our old habits, with more fervor.
그러나 길게 보면 저는 큰 영향을 줬다고 생각합니다.
Having said that, if you look back on this in a long perspective, I think it would have impacted our lives.
어쩌면 정말 사는 게 뭔지에 대해서 본인도 모르게 무의식적으로 생각하게 됐을 겁니다.
Maybe it did trigger a subconscious exploration of what life is or what living means.
네, 그래서 저는 앞으로 많은 영향을 줄 거라고 생각합니다.
So I think moving forward, we'll see more and more deeper impacts of coming out of this pandemic.
뭐 어떤 변화가 올지는 좀 더 기다려봐야 되겠습니다.
But what kind of change will it trigger? We'll just have to wait and see.
제가 있는 곳에는 많은 변화가 왔습니다.
So where I live, there was a lot of change.
네, 저희들은 200여 개의 센터가 있었는데 다 없앴습니다.
We used to have 200 plus actual physical centers throughout South Korea. We got rid of all of them.
전부 온라인으로 바꿨습니다.
We changed all our programs to online, virtual.
수입도 적어졌지만 지출은 아예 없어졌습니다.
The revenue, incoming resources decreased, but then the outsourcing or cost almost went to nil.
그래서 뭐 운영에 이제 걱정은 없어졌습니다.
So we have no kind of concerns now about operations.
뭐 또 새로운 걱정이 생기겠죠.
Now, of course, it's going to trigger other sources of concerns.
그러나 에너지 이동하는 에너지라든지 뭐 여러 가지 공간 활용이라든지 이런 문제에서 저희들은 소비 수준을 많이 줄였습니다.
But all the resources we used to spend on transportation, space leasing, all that, we were able to greatly reduce that.
이렇게 저는 보이지 않게 변화가 온다고 생각합니다.
I think these are, foundational changes to us. I think other changes are just as invisible but impactful.
재택근무가 많이
We
늘어났잖아요.
have a lot of people working from home.
그러면 이제 사무실이 많이 필요 없어질
Then you
겁니다.
don't need as many office space.
우리가 생활 공간으로만 쓰던 것을 사무 공간으로 같이 쓰므로 해서 공간의 효율성이 높아졌습니다.
So living space has now become working space, so we're more efficient in our use of space.
또 굳이 시내에 있어야 될 필요가 없어졌습니다. 시내에 있어야 될 필요가 없어요.
And there's no need for us to always be downtown.
멀리 떨어져도 됩니다.
We can be far away.
그래서 도심의 복잡함을 피할 수도 있고요.
Maybe reduce the congestion in urban centers.
저는 시간이 흐르면 많은 변화가 올 거라고
So
생각합니다.
as time goes, I think we'll see lasting impacts from the pandemic.
온라인으로의 전환이 점진적으로 일어나다가 아주 급격하게 일어났습니다.
The slow evolution to virtual actually, kind of got expedited.
이 좋은지 나쁜지는 아직 평가할 수 없습니다.
So we don't know whether that's good or not,
그러나 변화는 급격하게 일어나고
but it
있습니다.
certainly was a certain change.
저희들은 그것을 긍정적으로 어떻게 바꿀 거냐 하는 것은 우리들의 과제입니다.
So it's up to us to actually how to turn that change into positive.
I like this positive ending about the pandemic. And just to add here at Church of the Holy City, we talked forever about going online and having cameras, and we never did it. Within 2 weeks in the pandemic, we did it. And I'm very thrilled that my 96-year-old father is now a member of the church and has been attending online ever since. And it's just a very cool thing. So there's a lot of, that's a really cool thing that I'll be very grateful the pandemic brought. So let's end on a positive note here about the pandemic. Good things have come out of it.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for imparting all your wisdom. I think we now know how to live our lives. And I want to say thank you to Jason Lim for being an excellent translator. And Annabel, I don't think I introduced myself. Annabel Park, and I'm president of the church, and we're going to be working very hard to make a difference in DC going forward with the Spiritual Entrepreneur Incubator, and hopefully with a new building in the coming months. Hopefully. And one last thing is I hope that we get to build on this and we get to do more together. And maybe we'll even have, I don't know, a trip from Church of the Holy City to Seoul. Who wants to go to Seoul, Korea? So thank you, and if you wouldn't mind coming to the stage for a group photo, I would really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Oh, could we? Yeah.